Hi, my name is Johnny Alfonso. Welcome to Georgia TESOL. Today's presentation is going to be a combination of virtual and interactive via the chat box. So I will present and then we will interact with the actual presentation together as I answer your questions and we share our knowledge together. The goal is that you will take at least one thing back to your classroom and to your students. Enjoy. Okay, so our presentation today is entitled Writing Scaffolds for Struggling Readers and Content Writing. And I teach at Dalton Middle School, and I am an ESOL Connections teacher, grades 6th through 8th. So why scaffold? And what does the research say about scaffolding? Number one, some studies of scaffolding have found that scaffolding is not easily defined or readily found in classrooms. The second reason is there is an urgent need to provide intense scaffolding to support the rapidly changing linguistic landscape of America. The third reason is that ELs are no longer exclusively new immigrants to the United States. The fourth reason is in the middle and high schools, 57% of students represent the second or third generation of immigrants to the United States. And finally, number 5, although these adolescents have been educated exclusively in the United States, they are still learning English, but unfortunately failing academically and dropping out of school in large numbers. 6, it is possible for second language learners to develop deep disciplinary knowledge and engage in challenging academic activities if teachers know how to support them pedagogically to achieve their potential. And that's where scaffolding plays a very important role. So I am sure that we have teachers and administrators and ESOL teachers from all over Georgia. If you don't mind, quickly take a minute and put in your chat box, where are you from and what are, and where do you teach or what do you do? So go ahead and just take a minute to do that and set your learning intention for today. What is it that you are here to gain or to obtain in this presentation? So just take a minute to do that. So I see, let's see, who do we have here? We have teachers and administrators and people from all over. So welcome. We're so glad that you are here. How do I scaffold writing through reading and content for even my most reluctant writers to succeed? So how do I scaffold writing through reading and content for even my most reluctant writers to succeed? That is our essential question for today. And I'm going to go ahead and do a quick summary in a nutshell, and then we're going to go ahead and break it down and break down the different strategies that we're going to talk about today. So number one, create a literacy community where students feel safe to talk and to take risks. Number two, integrate reading and writing by regularly writing in journal responses or using text frames. Number four, use independent reading level text to teach difficult concepts. Number four, use read aloud books and movies that were created from books based on content and historical fiction. These are extremely effective, and I have found them extremely effective with my students, and my students love when we go ahead and watch a movie and read a book and then compare and contrast. And this is important to expose students to content and sophisticated vocabulary that if they were reading on their independent level, they wouldn't be able to gain. So this was just an activity that we did at the beginning of the school year. I like to start my school year this way, identifying or talking about what is a literacy community and what is it that we need as learners to become a literacy community. And so we look at specifically talk, listen, think, read, and write. And then as we start the school year, when we do the different activities, students identify, is their ticket out the door, identify something that we did that day that people of a literacy community do. So today what we're going to do is we are going to look at some common strategies that you are probably very, very familiar with. But we're going to go ahead and talk about how do we scaffold those strategies for our most struggling readers and for students that need support with content writing. And the three strategies that we are going to look at are making connections, whether it's or whether it's text to self, text to text, text to world. Number two, the second strategy we will look at is making predictions. And the last one is comparison and contrast. So these are very, very common strategies that we are going to look into. How do we scaffold them for our ELs? And we'll go ahead in the chat box throughout the presentation. We will go ahead and talk about, well, what is the difference between those common strategies that we would normally use in our classrooms and the added scaffold so that we can identify those scaffolds specifically. So we start out the school year by reading, and normally for our ELs, and we would have like simple sentence starters for our real struggling readers. And so I put up this chart, we create this chart and we add a couple at a time. So there's a scaffolding even in a simple chart like this. We add one or two of these bullets at a time as we read, and then we respond in our journals. However, we want our students to be able to use academic language beyond those simple sentence starters that we just saw. So one way that is very effective is to create sentence frames or paragraph frames. And this is the paragraph frame for students to be supported in using content vocabulary when describing text to self connections. So in the book Blank by Blank, so there you see title and author. I made a text to self connection because, and then the character or the person, and then write what the character did, say, feel, or experience that was like what you did, say, feel, or experience. And then there is the text frame that they would use. And at the very beginning, they're needing the text frame, but eventually what we want to do is for them to be able to use this vocabulary when they are writing automatically without having the support of the actual scaffold. Taking it to the next level, you can ask them to then cite their sources. So now we're going to look at scaffold making connections text frames. How do we do that? Well, just a real quick recap using read aloud, modeling those reading strategies, sharing the writing, doing shared writing of the text frame together. So at the very beginning, you work on those text frames on the board and then on a chart paper. I like to use a projector where I'm actually projecting and I am typing what the students are telling me. And then we have them work with those sentence frames and partnerships. then individually. And finally, it makes it to that journal, to that journal entry uh, where we expect them to use it fluidly and fluently. So just real quickly in our chat box. So that was a very common strategy, right? Text to self connection. But what do you see? Where do you see the scaffold? Where do you see the actual scaffold happening in this actual sequence? So go ahead and take a minute to reread it if you need to, and then take another minute to type in the chat box on where do you see the actual scaffold that maybe when you're making a regular text to self connection in a class maybe of English speakers, you wouldn't take as much time. Okay, so some of you might have thought that it is right here. The scaffolding happens right here. When we go from modeling the strategy to shared writing, where the teacher is actually writing what the students are saying, to then partners, where they're working with those text frames with a partner, and then individually, and then using those text frames to write in their journal. So that's where the scaffolding occurs. Excuse me. So the next strategy is scaffolding text-to-text connections. And sometimes this is difficult for our ELs. So it's important that we do have that scaffold in place. And before I share the charts, I want to quickly, we're going to quickly do the same thing. So as I'm quickly reading the sequence of the steps, think of where is the scaffolding actually happening, that normally with English speakers, we would just say, okay, let's make a text-to-text connections, and they would quickly pick it up. Okay, so if we're scaffolding, we provide those level texts for students to read in partnerships, model reading the two texts. So the teacher would model reading those two texts, model completing the elements of the story sheet. So you will see in a minute some sheets, and you will actually model how to create each of those sheets. And then we would do turn and talk, where both partners would turn and talk and discuss the similarities between the two texts. Then we would share write a list of similarities. So I would be up there with my projector and typing what the partnerships are actually sharing with the class. And we would make a list of similarities on the projector. Then what we would do is we would take the actual sheets of the two texts that they created, and we would actually put it on a large Venn diagram so that students can visually see the comparison and contrast of the two stories. Optional, use the information for students to complete the Let's Compare book graphic organizer. So then we will model how to complete the text-to-text connection sentence frame and model completing the journal entry from the sentence frame. And again, first we start whole class, and then in partnerships, then individually, and always sharing with partners. And so that's where the scaffolding happens. So everything that we do, we always go from whole group modeling to partnerships, to small groups, to partnerships, and then to individual. So this is the sheet that I was telling you. So the students would read their first book, and well, as a class would read the first book, and we would complete this this sheet. And then we would do the same thing for the second book. After we do that, we complete the similar events for both of those books. and they could be article, and think of these strategies across content areas. So social studies, science, there are um, so many subject areas that, I mean, really in life in general, we do comparison and contrasting in everything. So this is a skill real that is super essential for academic knowledge. So then we go ahead and put the things that are different about the two stories, and the story elements are going to be different for those two stories. Okay, but then the things that are the same are going to be placed in the middle. And what we want is for students to visually see that these two columns on the far left and far right are for things that are different, and the one in the middle is for things that are the same. After that, they are ready to make a text-to-text connection. So what they would do is they would look at the middle column, things that are the same, and we emphasize that. And so here is the sentence frame. I made a text-to-text connection between the book blank by blank and the book blank by blank, because in both books blank, and then write what was the same about both books. Okay? And like we talked about before, first we do that whole group, then small groups, then in partnerships, and then individually till it becomes um, second nature for the students to know how to use that academic language in their content writing, whether they're writing for social studies or science or any content area. Okay, so the other strategy that's very common is making connections text to world. Okay, for some reason this is a little harder for a lot of students. And so we would go through the same exact process where we would start large group, modeling, projecting, discussing, typing on the board, and then we go to small group, then partnerships, then individually till it becomes second nature. Okay, so let me show you the next. For text to world, you would have, whoops, you would have the title of the book. It's coming. You would have the title of the book, the author, and then similar events for both the text and the world. And they would use this organizer. That's the word I've been missing, organizer. To complete their text to world connection sentence frame. So there it is. Okay, I made a text to world connection because in the book blank by blank, my computer's giving me trouble. I'm glad it's kind of pre-recorded. At least this section is. Okay, so here's that text to world connection um, by blank because, and then write what happened in the book that also happens in the world. And then they would complete their text to world connection. They would use this actual graphic organizer to then write in their journal. They would do it so much in that scaffolding format that it would become second nature. That's the goal, that it becomes second nature. So the next strategy that we're going to talk about is making prediction. And again, these are common strategies that we use. And what we want to do is scaffold how to make those predictions. Because although for us that know English very well, making a prediction may seem simple, for our English learners, sometimes it is not that simple. So here again, we read a book or watch a movie created from a book and stop before the climax of the story, okay? And then create a plot diagram. Discuss the story in the context of the plot diagram. Here we are interjecting and using that academic language that our students so much need to understand. Okay, they cannot give us an exposition or a rising action in our language arts classes if they don't even know what it is and they don't even know what the words mean. So it is important that we use that academic language when we are doing these exercises and these activities in our literacy or science or social studies classes. And so we discussed the story in the context of the plot diagram, the exposition, the rising action, the title, the author, the setting, the problem, the conflict. And then we share write a character name chart because we don't want our students getting stuck on spelling of names or spelling of words that we know may be difficult for them. We want to focus on the strategy and we don't want to create a situation where students are struggling in the other little things that are important, but not for this particular lesson. Okay, so we create a character's name chart, we share write a word bank for our predictions, and then we model think aloud, predicting using the plot diagram. Model writing prediction with the text frame. And here we go. We go with partner sharing the predictions aloud, and then the partner text frame, and then the individual text frames. And finally, the creating that prediction. Okay, so here is the chart that then we end up with. I will share the charts that we end up with in order to create this prediction. This is the end product, or not the end product, but the end organizer that we want our students to have, be able to complete independently so that then they can use this graphic organizer to be able to write their prediction in their journal using the academic language. And that is the key. Okay. And I talk to my students about when we're in first grade, yes, our predictions may sound like, yes, we think the king is going to live or he's going to die. But when we're in middle school, we need to go beyond that, or in high school, and we need to we need to use our academic language. So this is what we want as our final graphic organizer. I predict that in blank, blank by blank, the rising action will include blank, ending in the blank, where blank, 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 okay, leading to. So what I want you to notice is the actual word bank and the color coding that is in this word bank. So I want you to notice that in blue, you have movie, book, article, story. Okay. And I added documentary because one of the movies that we saw was a documentary for September 11th. And so here we have the blue, wherever you see the blue, and here, I don't know if you could, whoops. Okay, so you could see the blue right here. So blue words will go in there. And this is one more area, one more way that we are scaffolding. For our more advanced students, we can just give them a word bank and a graphic organizer that is not color coded. But for our students needing support, they need the color coding, okay? So then if you notice, my pink words are beginning, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. And so they will go in the pink words. So this was the story elements chart that we talked about, where you read a story and you stop right before the climax so that then you can talk about the exposition and you could talk about the rising action, okay? And you can define it. The bottom words are defining what those words mean. And then when you get to the climax, you talk about the climax. So you talk about the academic vocabulary in context of the actual reading, okay? Because they're going to be expected to use this vocabulary when they complete their graphic organizer and when they enter their journal entry. This was the other chart that I shared, that we create a character's chart because we don't want them hung up on spelling of words that for this particular activity, they don't need to struggle with. Okay, so we want to go ahead and write those names. And again, you don't give it to them, they brainstorm it, you write it. Okay. And then here's a prediction word bank. Again, scaffolding even further. Okay, so for the book thief, we have the characters, and then here they came up with these words that we learned in the story, okay, and that are important for us to be able to predict. And finally, this is the graphic organizer that I said we wanted as the end product for our organizer. Okay, so to scaffold even more though, what I do is I actually type for for our for our readers that don't need as much support. I actually give them a very small introduction, okay, in their graphic organizer that is typed. I can predict using a plot diagram to organize my thinking. Okay, clarity and what we expect our students to do is very important. So stating that learning intention and stating that success criteria, which is I want them to be able to predict using a plot diagram and using it to organize their thinking. So here's a short introduction. In the movie The Book Thief, the rising action includes that Max is hiding in the Huberman's basement and Liesel is keeping the big secret that she's a Jew. I predict the rising action will end in the blank. So here we expect them to write about the climax, in this part about the falling action, and in this part about the resolution. Now, on the back of that sheet, you will have the definition of that academic vocabulary that we are expecting our students to use in case they need to review it. You also have it on the chart. So they have it visually in the classroom, and then they have it also on the back of their sheet, of their organizer rather. Now, for the students that need more scaffolding, we would give them a richer introduction. And this is huge. They need the richer introduction. They need the words underlined, those characters bold-faced. Okay. And then their graphic organizer looks a little bit different. It's a little simpler. So here it says, I predict that in the climax of the story, Neftali, so here are some character names in green, Neftali, Adolfo, Uncle Orlando, and Mr. Reyes, okay? And the resolution. So there I showed you a few ways that we scaffold when making prediction. So again, a very common strategy used in a way that is scaffolded and broken down so that our students can write in any content area. Are there any questions? Let's take a minute to write in the chat box any questions that you may have. Okay, so I see some of your questions, and at the very end, we'll have time to be able to chat and discuss some of the strategies a little bit more if you want to, or to ask more questions. So the last strategy that I want to share in terms of scaffolding is comparing and contrasting. And I have it broken down in parts because comparing and contrasting is a skill that we need across content areas. It's a very important skill and it is a difficult skill. And it is a difficult skill for our ELs to use academic language and write about comparing and contrasting. Okay, so this is an activity that I did in my classroom. We viewed the documentary of 9/11, or you could read a book. So we discussed what students noticed about the documentary. And there again, I'm up there typing while they are telling me what they thought, what did they notice about a documentary. And what I'm looking for is for them to notice things about nonfiction. Like, for example, the footage was for real. For example, uh, it was real dates, real people, real events. So that's what I'm looking for. And then I kind of bridge it over to nonfiction because that is the difference between a documentary and a regular movie that actors act in, right? So fiction and nonfiction kind of have those parallel ideas, and so I like to kind of bring that in. So then we discussed the WH uh, organizer, and there again we do it together. Then we do it in small group. Then we come back whole class, share our responses, and all along I am projecting lots of visuals. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like. So part one is you always want to go for clarity. You always we always want our students to understand what we are expecting them to do. And in this case, the learning intention was I will understand how to compare and contrast a movie and a documentary. And the success criteria is I can demonstrate my understanding of comparison and contrasting by completing a Venn diagram. Okay. And the ticket out the door is share your Venn diagram. At the end of each class, we would go back to those learning intentions and see and ask, were you successful today? Did you accomplish your goal? Okay, so here's part one. So first we watched the documentary. We completed this organizer whole group. Then we did some partnership work, and it depends on the level of your students. Some of them may be able to do this independently. Our students that are struggling readers need that support, maybe getting them started while they talk and you type on the projector, and then they complete it, and then they can finish it. Okay. Part two of the scaffold was viewing a movie. They love being able to compare movies to books and movies to documentaries. It is a high interest activity. Okay. So they view the movie. They discuss, again, we discuss what we noticed about the movie. Remember, they already saw the documentary. So now we talk about those different pieces. Oh, these are actors. These are stage scenes. That's not exactly how it happened. These are just stage scenes, and it didn't happen on the very exact day that they filmed it. And so these are the different types of discussions that we have. And while they're discussing, I am typing away and I am projecting. Okay. And then we discuss the movie graphic organizer, small group partnerships, uh, and then coming back to discuss it. So here's a simple graphic organizer. No big deal about the graphic organizer. These are organizers we're very familiar with that we use all the time. The power of the organizers is how we use them, and how we break it down from whole group to small group partnerships, individual. Okay, so here you go. So for your more advanced readers, they could probably complete this on their own. And for your more advanced writers, for the students that need more support, you may need to start them off by projecting and writing and letting them finish. For the students that need a lot of support, you may want to do most of it with them, because remember, the idea is we want them to compare and contrast. So if you need to give a lot of support in the actual details, it's okay, because the idea is we really want them to use the information to compare and contrast. Okay, so part three now is the actual scaffolding of comparing and contrasting. Okay, so I will share what this actually looks like in the charts that I'm going to share now. So after we watched, after they completed the WH organizer and the movie organizer, we actually wrote out. They shared those out after they did some group work together. They shared those out. I typed them on the screen. And then I went ahead and printed those comments that they made and cut them out. And then I put them in an envelope and I broke up the students into different groups. So each group got a big giant organizer just like this and an envelope with their facts that they came up with probably the day before and that I typed for them. So this allows them to have conversations, to use their speaking skills, to debate what fact goes where. And so here you'll see the differences between the documentary and the differences between the movie and then things that are the same. After they do this work on their own, I am actually walking around checking in with each group and looking at how they are doing. And as I see the groups that need support, that I see maybe they have differences where it should be same and same where they should be differences. We talk about those things and I give them an opportunity to go ahead and make those corrections. And that's why I love this activity, because imagine when students really struggle with this concept and they have already spent so much time completing a graphic organizer in writing. At the very end, when you if you go and have that conversation with them, it is disheartening for an EL to think, oh my goodness, I practically have to do this thing all over again. So we want to set up our students for success. And the way we do that is by using the strategy. So now they can actually physically move these facts, these pieces of paper, until they have pretty much a perfect graphic organizer with their facts in their perfect places. Then this is their graphic organizer. It's their turn. So we did the hard work, the thinking, the group work, the talking, the processing. Now all they have to do is copy that information from that graphic organizer. Because remember, the ultimate goal is we want to write about these things. So we want to scaffold these pieces that this is where our writing falls apart. If the students cannot write their facts in the correct spaces in that graphic organizer, when they get to the writing piece, it's going to be so jumbled and students get discouraged because now it's almost like starting all over again. So we want to prevent that. We want to go ahead and set up our students for success so we don't have to undo a lot of writing. That's not what we want to do with our students. Okay. So anyway, so here's another piece of scaffolding for your students that do really great with copying. No problem copying that information off that big graphic organizer. However, you will have ELs, it could be even adults, that maybe come from China or from other countries where their system of writing is not like the Romance languages that we are used to, where we write from left to right. Or you may have special education students that really have a hard time with fine motor. Well, guess what? We need to scaffold this one more time. And after they do that work of moving all those pieces, what we're going to do is we're actually going to write it in this tiny graphic organizer, and we're projecting it because we're modeling that if they were actually doing the work, we would want them to write it like this. Okay, so then after I have written it, maybe the next day, I copy that graphic organizer that has all those facts already written on it. And for those special education students or those students from China that may have trouble writing, and you want to get them to a place where they actually are going to do the actual writing of comparing and contrasting, what you're going to do with them is you're going to have them highlight 2 events or 3 events, depending on their levels, that they want to compare and contrast. Highlight 2 in each of the sections. Okay, so this is describing everything I just described to you. And finally, we come to the graphic organizer of comparing and contrasting. Again, I want you to notice the scaffold in the color coding. All right. And if you have upper level students that don't need the color coding, it's fine to give them just a regular black and white graphic organizer. But for those that need it, you need to go ahead and give it to them. So in red, we have film, articles, stories, movies, documentary, books, and you have the red, and that's where those words are going to go. In blue, you have your comparing and contrast academic language that you want them to use, like both, same, and different, and they're going to go in the blue lines. And then finally, you have your transition words like last, second, and first. And we've had many lessons on transition words, so they will know why those go at the beginning or not. It may be in transition in the middle, but why they're in orange, and then they will go in the orange pieces. So the final product is, remember, we don't want our writing to fall apart early in the process, and that's why we are scaffolding. The final product is that then they use this graphic organizer to actually write the comparing and contrasting. So this seems like a lot, but if you scaffold, then you will automatically see that eventually they will be able to do this successfully, independently, on their own, in any class and in any content. And that would be amazing, right? So in summary, create a literacy community, how to scaffold writing through reading and content for even your most reluctant writers to succeed. Number one, create a literacy community. Number two, integrate reading and writing. Number three, use independent reading level text. Number four, use read aloud books and movies created from books based on content and historical fiction. And our ultimate goal is to help students love to read and write, achieve their personal best. And that's important, right? WIDA can do charts. Achieve their personal best, achieve at their maximum potential, and be successful citizens. Okay, so now we're going to take a few minutes to take questions. Are there any questions or any comments? Let's go ahead and type those in the chat box. And we can stay on Zoom beyond this recording so that we can continue talking in the chat box. Okay. So please take time to complete the evaluation. We would love to hear from you. I know this is the first time we do virtual, so we would love your feedback. Thank you so much for coming. And my contact information is right here. So I will go ahead and take any questions at this time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And stop the recording. Have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you were able to take at least one thing that you could use with your students.